You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
Welcome back. We are joined by State Senator Chuck Weaver. Thank you very much for being here. This is the first opportunity we've had to talk about that recently enacted budget, but a budget that was passed on a bipartisan basis.
Right.
And the folks in the General Assembly, for the most part, are even calling it balanced, though not all of the financial institutions, the ratings agencies agree, though there was some good news this past week. What's your assessment overall of the budget that was passed?
Yeah. Moody's moved us to stable, so that agency believes we're on the right path. Was balanced. We probably have about $950 million, what we call forecasted surplus, which means that if you have $40,000 available for paper clips, we use 30,000, there's 10,000 there, you follow me? So there's extra dollars in this budget for that type of thing. Really good news, $400 million in savings on pension funding moving ahead based on some buyouts that are available, and also something called not allowing spiking to happen, where people get near the end of their career and the employer spikes them to move them out quicker, to bring a less expensive person in. Problem is the state picks up the pension. So we'll put limitations on how big that last salary could be. There's some really good stuff in this budget.
Now, while Moody's did, as you mentioned, give the state some good news, a couple of the other ratings agencies called the budget business as usual and said there was a hole in the budget, hundreds of millions of dollars wide. And obviously a budget that the state does is based on estimates, so there does remain to be seen how these estimates play out. Sure. Do you have any concerns whatsoever?
No, I believe we'll end up with working this through in the year. You know, you have revenues that are unknown, you have expenses that can be watched, and it's the governor's job. And the governor is, he's a good businessman. He's a good businessman. He is the guy who's been focused on the fiscal health of our state, and the part that's in his hands, he will drive this thing to balanced, I believe.
The other aspect of the budget that folks were talking about is the bipartisanship that played out. It seemed to be celebrated on both sides of the aisle. How do you feel about that? Is it something that can be worked on going forward? Is it a positive sign, or was this just something that played out because it's an election year? Yeah,
I think I've got to be honest. I think most of this budget getting us to where we were as quick as we got there at the end with agreement and everybody hugging each other and bragging on the fact we worked in a bipartisan manner. A lot of that was about politics. Very important for the governor to be going to this election this fall with a balanced budget and without an impasse. Very important for Speaker Madigan with all the representatives he has up. Those folks would be in a tough spot if there was an impasse. So I think that was the political side of it. I think it's on myself and especially local legislators. We work very well together to try to keep that type of bipartisan nature going. But in the end, it's discouraging. You know, I read a great book called by Sun Tzu, with regard to, I'm sorry, I speak about this all the time and I'm drawing a blank on the name, but basically people motivate from a perspective of self-preservation, self-interest, and if it's in people's best interest to work in a bipartisan manner, they will, and if it isn't, they won't. But it's the art of war. It came back to me. So Sun Tzu with the art of war and talking about self-interest. And we just have to challenge ourselves to make sure we're not there for self-interest, we're there to serve constituents. And that's our job, is to make sure we're doing that the best way we can.
You had a more productive legislative session, and I know that before we came on, you were talking about citizen legislating, so working with the members of the community to get some legislation passed. Last year, 2 bills, 16 this year. Talk about that process, some of the legislation that you worked on.
Right. The biggest problem we have is there's so many things we have to focus on. People lose track of staying on track of the most important things. So what I've done is something called citizen legislating, where I will take, someone comes to me with an idea and I say, I'll help you get it passed, but you've got to really help keep us on track and drive this. So 2 or 3 examples. Worked with the Downtown Development Corporation with their historic tax credit. Mike Freilinger drove that. I worked with a woman named Molly Palmer in Galesburg. We changed dual credit law in the state of Illinois. Molly and I took about 6 months to do that. Teacher shortage, I work with Jody Scott, who leads an education advisory group for me, and also Dr. Crott. And we came up with, I believe, 3 very important changes to our state with regard to how we can make sure there's teachers in the schools this coming fall. We also worked on a basic skills testing and how we could change that some. But you know, I tell people, and this may not be the right thing for me to say politically, but it's the truth. I can't be passionate about every issue, and I definitely don't have knowledge about every issue. So when a citizen comes to me, I say, you've got more knowledge than I do, and I hope you have more passion than I do on this topic. You help me drive it, and it works.